Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today is a very special episode with a very special guest. For those of you who listen regularly, you know last week I had Dr. Elizabeth Cohen on the show, the divorce doctor, our friend, the divorce doctor. And because September is Suicide Prevention Month, Dr. Elizabeth was on and we were talking about the perfect storm. The fact that during divorce, your chances of experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety go up multifold, as well as the fact that we're going through the stress and anxiety of COVID is really leading to sort of an unprecedented number of people experiencing mental health problems. And so that was our episode last week. And this week, I really want to build on that and bring to your attention something that has been brought to my attention very personally recently, but through my friend, and I'm just so thrilled to have her here. So let me tell you about Wendy Dolin. Wendy is a therapist herself, and she's also a nationally recognized drug safety advocate. And we met socially through a group that my husband is involved with and Wendy's husband was involved with. And that's part of the story. So Wendy and her husband, Stuart, were happily married for 35 years, living, sort of that picture perfect life. They have two beautiful children. I love that she includes, they had an energetic Labrador. All of you know my dogs are my fur babies. But unfortunately and sadly and tragically in 2010, life changed in literally an instant for Wendy and her family when Stuart tragically died while suffering from an adverse drug reaction called akathisia. And if you're like me, you've never heard of akathisia. I had never heard of akathisia. And thankfully I did through Wendy, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. But Wendy has taken what many, might have crushed many people, what might have led many people to have great difficulty in moving forward and finding positivity in their lives. And Wendy has created a nonprofit, which is called the Medication-Induced Suicide Prevention and Education Foundation. And that's in memory of her husband, Stuart Dolin. The acronym is MISSD, MISSD, and it is dedicated to increasing akathisia awareness. So let me, before I go into my personal experience recently, I just think, Wendy, your bravery in coming here and talking about this is something that is very important, and I truly admire you for coming on the show today to talk about this. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Susan. It's an honor to be here. I can't wait to be part of this podcast.
Well, and so I do want to tell my listeners, I mentioned to everyone last episode with Dr. Elizabeth that one of the things that I suffer from is seasonal affective disorder. And so I have been on Lexapro, which is an antidepressant, for a few years. But recently I went away for a week and somehow missed putting my little pill that I take, one pill a day, into my pill holder. Didn't even realize I'd forgotten, but was away, and about midweek, I started to feel strange. That's the best way I can describe it. I felt fuzzy. I felt like I couldn't think clearly. And I just didn't feel right. And I thank God that you and I have talked, because it dawned on me that this might have something to do with the fact that I wasn't taking my regular medication. And that maybe this was a withdrawal or some sort of negative side effect. And I only knew about this, Wendy, from talking to you. But because I had spoken to you, because I knew the seriousness of this situation, I reached out to my doctor immediately. She called in a substitute prescription for me. I ran out and got it. And within, one day, I was back to feeling completely normal and myself. And what I said to you earlier was, I'll never know what might have happened if I had not spoken to you. And I thank God that I will never know, and my family will never know. Unfortunately, you do know. what might have happened or how that might have played out. So again, I think this is such an important topic to talk about. And I'm just grateful that you're here to help raise awareness as you have been doing with myth.
And Susan, thank you for your own personal story, because it's stories like yours that I hear all over the world that come into us through Shared at Mist. And you realize the importance that this is life-saving work. You don't know where this could have gone. And I'm so grateful that you knew this information.
Well, and that's, I mean, I will be eternally grateful. And it's, you and I had already talked about doing this episode, but it made me that much more, intent on getting this information out to everyone. And I just want to say to those who are listening, you may be thinking that, well, I'm not on antidepressants or I don't take, that type of medication. There's more to this story than just antidepressants, anti-anxieties, and we're going to get into that. But the key here is awareness, right? I mean, everything starts with being aware. And you, Wendy, and Stuart, your late husband, you were not aware.
No,
And so I don't want to, take you through too much of this, but could you tell a little bit of the story about what happened for Stuart and for all of you? Because I think that will bring this home for people.
Well, thank you. I mean, Stuart was a partner at an international law firm. And I'd say maybe late spring, early summer, he started to experience just some situational anxiety. And as a therapist, I see that all the time. And he thought that maybe by taking a medication, he would feel better. I mean, he was a very proactive person about his health. We call them good consumers of therapy and mental health. And he was prescribed Paxil. And almost from the beginning of him starting to take the medication, I noticed changes. I noticed changes in just, little weepy. He was a lot of agitation, and it kind of crescendoed. That's how I can describe it. It crescendoed till the night before he died. We were sitting at dinner and he was tapping his leg and he kept saying to me, Wendy, I don't get it. I still feel so anxious. But Stuart had a plan. He was going to get up and exercise. He listened to a meditation tape. And in the morning, he was driving to work. He said he felt a little bit better. And that was the last conversation I ever had with him. And then, he ended up having some meetings and went out to lunch with a client where, he planned for the next week's meeting. And what becomes sort of a little bit of morbid humor is he had gout, and he used to talk about his last meals before he died, and it was going to be a big steak or something like that. So an hour before he died, he had a chicken salad with the dressing on the side. So the joke is like, that wouldn't have been it. And then he got back to his office, got up from his desk, left the building, and 30 minutes later, he walked to a train station that he never would have taken. It was going out to O'Hare, and ended his life by jumping in front of the train. And, this was a total shock. And, being a social worker, being a safe patient advocate who deals with suicide, you can always say to someone, well, you don't know someone's real deep, dark secrets. Maybe there's some hidden issue. And no, I mean, this was just so out of character for Stuart. I mean, he was high on life. He was, a really funny, great father, husband. I mean, I later found out that we were the marriage and family that people, used to use as an example. And so he was gone, and, it was just, no note, nothing, and so what happened was, pardon me, about a month after he died, unbeknownst to me, friends of mine were researching this because, nobody could believe this was Stuart. And about a month after Stuart died, one of my girlfriends called me up and said akathisia. And I remember writing it down on a piece of paper, and I didn't know how to spell it. No one knew how to pronounce it. And then that night when I found out about it, I Googled akathesia, Paxil, and suicide. And then all of a sudden, all this information popped up. And it was like, I've spoken about this before. It's one of those moments where how do you have this information and just go, oh, well, I'm going to go on with my life. And it was so deadly and it caused so much harm that I said, this has to be my life mission.
Well, and to your credit, you've made it your life mission. When people hear what you've accomplished with MIST and just the outreach that you've done, me being one little tiny piece, but you've reached so many people. But so it strikes me, you find this huge influx of information when someone brings it to your attention. But what is akathisia? What is that that you didn't know about, I didn't know about?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, akathisia, by definition, is an adverse drug side effect. And what's significant about this is that it causes such internal restlessness that the sufferer is driven to violence, self-harm, or suicide. And what's really important for your viewers to know is this is not happening to suicidal people. This is a drug reaction. And that's why I felt that, millions and millions of people in this country take medications, and how can they not be aware of such a devastating side effect? In fact, one scientist who talked about akathisia states, it's so disturbing and hard to handle that death is a welcome result. So Stuart didn't want to end his life. He wanted to end the feeling. And I'm going to go to my notes here because basically this is what I tell people whenever I speak anywhere. For whatever reason you take a medication, if for ever the reason that you were prescribed the medication, you either start to feel worse or you start to have symptoms that were not your presenting problem, you need to be a good consumer. You need to call your doctor. But if you really are starting to feel suicidal, you need to call 911. And so there's internal symptoms that are sometimes harder to understand. So there's, let me just say this, there is the inner signs can include feelings of agitation, anxiety. People will call it brain zaps. People will feel like they have their brains on fire.
The brain zaps. That's a great way to describe it. That is exactly how I felt when I wasn't taking the medication.
So as a question to you, Susan, when those brain zaps occurred, what did it feel like? What went through your body? What was going through you at that time?
For me, it's very hard to describe. I have to say that, but brain zaps is about as close as I can get there. But it's also, you almost feel like you're removed from your body.
Exactly.
I felt like I was experiencing it from outside.
Yeah, people will talk about this and is an out-of-body experience, and people feel like, my mouth is sucking on a battery, I've heard, or, worms are crawling on me. And one of this woman, Kim Woodsack, who's one of the leading safe patient advocates in the country, she said that her husband felt he would actually put his hands on his head. I don't get it, like he was outside of his body. The outer signs are, agitation and pacing, rocking back and forth. I mean, in fact, quite tragically, the last person that saw Stuart said he was pacing back and forth on the platform and looked like a polar bear in a cage. And so it's that kind of profound, symptom. But what I think you're describing, and this is the thing that so many people talk about, is this cognitive confusion. Like people who were involved in their daily routine. Another activist will describe her husband as he listened to a TV show and couldn't follow the plot. He was, in Stuart's case, he just seemed like, daily routines were just kind of tricky for him. So I think that in another one of our people who is involved with akathisia, her daughter, a college student, had gone to class every single day for months and then suddenly couldn't find her classroom. So the combination of the inner signs, the outer, and then that cognitive confusion makes this a very profound, underreported side effect.
Well, and that I think is significant for people because honestly, if I hadn't talked to you, I wouldn't have put any of this together, right? I had I didn't even know I wasn't taking my pill. It didn't occur to me to go look until I put it together based on our conversations. And that's what I'm hoping, people are going to start having some sort of ability to see these symptoms for what they are, perhaps, and at least investigate it. So that's the other thing is what I called my doctor immediately, right? That's what first thing I thought of. And I will tell you, when I told her I by mistake was not taking my antidepressant, she jumped on it immediately. She knew the danger and the worry, and she stressed to me the importance of quickly going and getting the refill and starting to take it again right away, but also mentioned to me and asked me, are you having any additional symptoms? Do you think you need additional help? Please make sure your family members know that you're going through this and having this. She actually spoke to my husband, who was with me at the time, to make sure everyone was aware.
I love what your doctor said, because we will talk about the buddy system, where we say to people, when you're stopping or starting or changing dosage. I mean, the definition, let me back up here. The definition of akathisia is when you're stopping or starting or changing the dosage of many classes of medication. If you start having these kinds of reactions, you need to call 911 or your doctor. But I also talk quite strongly about the buddy system. Like if you're starting a new med, talk to someone, make them aware of that. But what I want to get back to, and this, Susan, I think this is really important for your viewers. When we first started MIST, and I just want to throw in how the name came about, because I think it's really special. When someone dies and you're in grief, you keep thinking of everything someone will miss. And so that's how we got to MIST, because Stuart isn't going to be around for those life events that we all wish he was here for. But when we first started MIST, the mission included antidepressants and antipsychotics. And this is the power of social media and the power of a platform, is as we started getting our message out, we have something called Shared at MIST. And all of a sudden we were hearing from people all over the world. And I mean all over the world. Well, this happened to me when I took my acne drug. This happened to me when I took a malaria drug. In fact, Erin Foster, the actress who has followed us, took Tamiflu and had suicidal thoughts. So the mission, what I don't want your viewers, again, I'm not anti-drug. We are pro-information, but I don't want your viewers to come away and say, oh, I'm not on an antidepressant, I'm not on an SSRI, I'm okay. It's an awareness, being in touch with your own body, where I'd say anything you can do. Benadryl can cause those kinds of symptoms. So I think it's just a general safe patient movement.
Well, I think that's an extremely significant factor for people to understand. We are talking about this in conjunction with my episode on the increase in anxiety and depression. But you can be on almost any kind of medication, as you just said, and could be experiencing these types of symptoms and have this type of reaction. Now, it's not a supremely common thing, but it is something to be aware of. It happens much more often than I think people are aware.
I agree. I mean, it's been very hard to get the exact percentage of people who have suffered from akathisia. However, because I don't think it's been recognized, it's been miscoded, mislabeled, I personally think it's happening more than we even know.
I would think that has to be true, because frankly, although I know I went through that, where would that be reported anywhere? Where would anyone know about it? Right.
And to my own embarrassment, I never reported Stuart's death to the FDA.
You wouldn't know.
I didn't. Yeah. It didn't cross my mind at that time.
it didn't, until we're just talking about it, it didn't really, I mean, I wouldn't even know where you would report it. I guess you're saying it would be to the FDA, but that's, I think, more of the danger here is that it is underreported. It's under-recognized in people, and not everyone's going to have the extreme reaction
Right.
of ending their life, but all of these can be, I mean, I will tell you that day that this happened, I was giving a presentation that had, I don't know, something like 600 people watching it, and I didn't feel I was particularly effective that day in my presentation. I was a little subpar, I felt, because frankly my brain just wasn't working properly, and that was very frustrating and upsetting to me in and of itself for people. So this can have, small effects, but also unfortunately very large effects on people's lives, like you've experienced.
I mean, the thing that's interesting is there's four types of akathisia. What you were experiencing was withdrawal akathisia, and that's actually become a huge topic in the news, especially in the UK. They're doing a lot of discussions about withdrawal, but then there's something called acute and chronic and tardive. Tardive happens delayed. Tardive means delayed. But what it's really been disturbing for me is Stuart had acute akathisia. It happened within 6 days. But the thing that's so terrible is chronic akathisia. And that is akathisia that is actually a lifelong problem. That even if you stop the meds, eat, no matter what you do, there are people that somehow neurologically have been triggered. And it just is a lifelong tragic thing they have to deal with.
Which, I mean, that's, it's awful to think about having just gone through it for a day or two.
Exactly.
But I do want to point out also one thing you just said there. Stuart had only been on Paxil for 6 days
Correct.
before he ended his life. So I also want people to hear that this can be an incredibly fast moving phenomenon.
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to explain to your viewers too, because this was really important to me. When I first learned about akathisia, and I was like, well, wait a minute, how could he have had lunch and been okay, and then like an hour later be gone? And so this Dr. David Healy, who's probably one of the leading experts on akathisia in the world, explained it to me in a way where I think your viewers can really understand that. His example was, you're in a nursing home and someone has Parkinson's, and there's two nursing stations, one on either end of the hallway. Someone could see someone very fluidly walking down the hall and think, well, that person's doing great. And then they freeze suddenly and they can't move. He calls that the light switch of akathisia, that's how quickly you can be feeling okay, having lunch, and then instantly it switches. And that really made so much sense to so many people. Like, how can you go from, like you said, just you had a switch? How do you
Yeah.
go from one thing to brain zaps? It's a switch. And I think people need to be aware of that.
Well, and that's, I can't say with any more vigor how important this topic is. And the thing that I want people who are listening to realize is it's important for them, but they also need to be thinking about their family members who are on medications, their friends. This is a message that is so important to continue to put out in ever evolving layers. And that's something that MIST is dedicated to. I mean, and what you have accomplished with MIST, that really started from that moment that you just described, where your friend told you about akathisia and you Googled it and found there were all these resources and realized it was important to get this out there. I mean, tell us a little bit just about what MIST does and what you've accomplished, because it's truly inspiring.
Well, thank you. I mean, when you are, the mission of MIST, and I have a wonderful board, is to really spread awareness and prevention. And so what we do is, and all the work we do is for free. In fact, if your viewers, like my presentation or what they've heard today, this is what we do. It's free to anybody's organization. And so we do, I've done conferences all over the world where literally we just take our message. We've identified audiences that we think this is important for. So basically, of course, healthcare professionals, and we have a CEU course that's on our website, miss.co, and it's a 1 hour free accreditation course for social workers or mental health care professionals. Everyone needs to keep up with their education. So that's been wonderful. We're currently working on one for doctors for continuing medication units, and that's being reviewed right now, and that's been a huge process. But we also have produced 2 extraordinarily simple and easily to view videos. One is what is akathisia, and what does akathisia look like? And as of this morning, I checked, we have over 205,000 viewers. And then we also have the Miss podcast. We have Akathesia stories. And these are people whose loved ones have experienced akathesia and share their stories. But in addition to that, we produce brochures, and we have a booth that we've taken all over the world. And what's really amazing about this is people go, wait a minute, you're not selling anything. You're not affiliated with drug companies. You've come all the way to Copenhagen. You've come all the way to London, And I said, yeah. That's it. And so I think that we spread awareness all over the world. And, and in addition to that, in addition to what would be considered, what you would think of as the more normal routine, doctors, healthcare professionals, nurses, pharmacists, we're like, wait a minute, first responders need to see this. One of my board members, newer board members, is married to a first responder, and her father actually took a muscle relaxant, and as he was coming off of it, ended his life by suicide. And her husband was with the police department, and I've spoken to first responders, crisis intervention organizations. I even went to Hazleton, Betty Ford, because there's been a connection between antidepressants, alcohol, and suicide. And I can just keep going on and on. So we've had these multiple ways that we share our message, and I take every opportunity to educate the public. One of, I think, my most favorite populations has been the military. That to me has been really an interesting love of mine. And it's so wonderful how it started. So early on with MIST, we do a lot of giveaways. We've done cups, everything. Well, early on we had t-shirts where we had the MIST logo on the front and the definition of akathisia on the back. And we would do these, suicide walks, and inevitably people would tap me on my shoulder, or the board members who were participating in this walk. Wait a minute, that happened to my loved one. I never knew it had a name. And I'd say 99% of the people were military families. So went back to my board, talked about it, and one of my board members got me connected with Canines for Veterans, which is just a wonderful organization. And through Canines for Veterans and military docs and all this, we started taking lots of resources to educate the military. And what's been fascinating about this military involvement is that the rate of suicide amongst the military, I believe, is 22 to 23 per day. And yes, they have PTSD and all that, but they've suddenly had an awareness that this is driven by medication. And so that's been something we're particularly proud of, the awareness that we've drawn in that particular group. And they're such a supportive group, and who doesn't want to help the military?
Right. Well, and I think that's such a significant thing. I know in one of our prior conversations, we were talking about the fact that the military has certain medications that they require people in the military to take that actually can be medications that can lead to akathisia. One of them was anti-malarial drugs. Is that right?
Yeah, there's an interesting case in Canada where the Canadian veterans are suing not the drug company, they're suing the Canadian government because they feel that they've been forced to take a drug that has a high suicide connection.
I mean, think about that for our military families and our members of the military that are already giving so much. And I know these medications, again, MIST is not anti-medication. I want everyone to hear that loud, strong, and clear. MIST is not against taking medications. MIST is for awareness.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, as a therapist, I refer clients for psych consults. I say the time has come. And when Stuart first died, I turned to medication, but we just want people to be aware. One of the things in association with the military that I wanted to bring up, and this is an important thing for your viewers in general. In fact, I believe it was a recent, New York Times article. It's called prescription cascading. And they just started talking about it. And that is, let's say for you, Susan, you took Lexapro and it wasn't working. Then the next step is perhaps your doctor would then say, okay, Susan, you need more Lexapro. Oh, well, that's not working. Let me add a mood disorder. Well, now I'm having trouble sleeping. And so this has been happening a lot with the military. In fact, at one of the times I spoke at this, I think it was, with the Canines for Veterans. And I remember sitting in the bar with my sister, who's a board member, and a group of veterans just started surrounding us, all sharing their story. And one guy had been on 19 meds, 19 meds, and felt suicidal. And he actually hurt his partner. And she, never violent. And so this is the kind of thing that I also talk about is we got to be careful about prescriptions. And my thing is that whatever reason you took the drug and it's not working, then maybe this is just not the right drug for you.
Right. And that's another significant factor. I think one of the things that people need to be is educated on all of these possibilities so that they can have the intelligent conversations with their doctors. But the other thing that I think you've made very clear here is not all doctors or other healthcare providers are 100% up to speed on this particular topic. And that is one of the important missions of MIST. You have the accreditation programs either already in existence or in the works for medical doctors. I do want people to know that we will have links to MIST and to the videos and resources. So Wendy, one of the other things that I think is important for us to cover is COVID, because COVID, as I talked about in the episode with Dr. Elizabeth, COVID is adding additional layers of medications and diagnoses and issues for people. How has COVID impacted what MIST is doing in your mission?
That's a great question. The thing that we talked about a lot, and I think that Dr. Cohn covered this in your last podcast, and that is that there has been a 34% increase of antidepressants and anti-anxieties because of medications, because of everything that's happening during COVID. And I think sort of now more than ever, people need to be aware of side effects. And I think so that's the increase in prescriptions is particularly significant. But me personally, I am concerned about the rush to market for COVID treatment and vaccines. I mean, I will look forward to the day when I can take a vaccine, but I'm somewhat concerned. I shouldn't say somewhat, I'm very concerned about, are we doing legitimate drug trials? Are these rigorous? I mean, I want to back up to a point that you just recently made, and that is, what do doctors know? Doctors get something, and I'm going to tie it into my concerns about drug trials. Doctors get something that's called a Dear Doctor letter, and it comes from the drug company, and it goes to the doctor. And when Stuart's doctor got the note on Paxil, and I don't remember what year it was sliced as the next best thing, since white bread, that Yeah, I don't know how even to explain it, and that it lowered the rate of suicide to about 1%. It was just an amazing exaggeration. Unbeknownst to the real world, was 20 people killed themselves during the drug trial, never reported. 40 more people developed symptoms of akathisia, and it was never reported. And it turned out that instead of Paxil reducing the threat of suicide to about 1%, it actually increased it to, I want to say, about 800%. So my concern is that we've got to hope and pray that these drug companies are taking their time, that they're warning people about drug side effects. And from me being a social worker, learning in statistics, drug trials can go for 12 to 18 months, and you need to include people of color, different ages. I don't think we've ever even tried the vaccine on children. So this is a long way of saying that I want consumers to just be aware, be grateful for when the vaccine comes, but also ask some questions. You know, what was your study group? How many people were in it? What are the reported side effects? And I think that is my biggest fear for all of this during COVID, those two issues.
It's hard to balance, right? We're all hoping and praying for the day where COVID can be something in our past, or at least something that we can go back to normal life. But at what cost? And I think we all need to be aware of that. So this is such an important topic for those of you who are listening. If you want to hear more, Wendy and I are going to continue this conversation on the YouTube channel video. So you can go over to the YouTube channel for the Divorce and Beyond podcast. It's on the website as well, divorceandbeyondpod.com. And you'll be able to continue watching the video. But for those who are listening to the podcast, Wendy, how can they get in touch with you, get in touch with Miss, and find out more about akathisia?
Basically, if they could go to miss.co and on MISSD.co. If you go there, you'll see, we post articles all the time. The 2 videos are there. There's also something, we have our Miss YouTube channel. That's important. We have, this is really important. It's miss.learnupon.com. That's our CEU course. And if you go to, MIST Foundation, you will also see many, many other articles and videos. And I always say this to people: if you like what you heard today, please post it on your Facebook page or your Twitter accounts, because this is, to me, a safe patient movement. And it's protecting yourself, your others, and people you care about. And it's an important, simple message. Start, stop, or change dosage of medication. Be aware.
And that's such a good point. I'm going to tell everyone I will be posting about this all, this week very heavily, but beyond. Go to my Instagram account or my Facebook account, Divorce and Beyond, on both of those, at Divorce and Beyond, and just please repost my posts. Let people know about this. You don't know who you're going to help. Wendy did not know when she went out to lunch with me and we talked about what had happened in her life, that she was probably going to be saving mine. And you may be doing the same for someone else. And Wendy, I'll be eternally grateful to you and to Mist and for what you're doing. So thank you for coming on. As I said, we will continue this conversation. But for those of you who are listening on the podcast, go on over to the show notes. I'm going to have links to Mist, links to their videos, links to all their channels. And again, please repost the posts. Let people know, share this information. Such an important topic.
Thank you, Susan, for this opportunity. It's been an incredible experience.
So we're talking about COVID, and you raised this with me the other day when we were talking, and it really had not occurred to me. I mean, I'm one of those people sitting here with my fingers crossed that they're going to find a vaccine for COVID soon so we can go back to normal life. But you're right. This rush. This is why doctors around the world are speaking out about the rush, about putting something out there too early or not doing proper trials. And you actually have gathered over the years a wealth of knowledge about drug trials that I think would be very interesting for you to share with the people who are watching, because it's a little shocking. It's a little scary that what happened. And so I think to go back to the fact that you became involved in a rather high profile lawsuit as a result of your husband's death. And that's where sort of layers of information started to be revealed to you. So can you take us back to that time and how you got this insider knowledge?
Yeah, this has been a fascinating journey. And I'm very clear, MIST has always been totally separate from my lawsuit. But as the result of this lawsuit, because it was groundbreaking, I received a lot of publicity, like in the New York Times and Law 360 and all the, Bloomberg News. I mean, it was all over. And because they were always linked to MIST, people would, as the result of the lawsuit, people also learn more about MIST. So this is what happened. It's just one of those things, Susan, where you just know that something like this cannot go on. You can't just lie about a medication and ruin someone's life. In the tragedy is profound. And so one of my friends, the one who actually told me it was akathisia, unbeknownst to me, had been in contact with lawyers. And there's a wonderful law firm in California called Baum Hedlund, and they're the leading product liability lawyers in the country. And in fact, I don't know if you've been following the other safe patient story, but Monsanto just got sued for their chemical Roundup. These were my lawyers. And I said to them, how can this exist? How could GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, know about this and get away with it? And I decided to take it upon myself to sue one of the largest drug companies in the world. And this was quite the journey, and a painful journey and an unpleasant journey. And once I saw the drug trials, I said, this just cannot exist. You just can't get away with this. So I take it to sue the drug company. And what made Stewart's case very tricky, and this is a whole other consumer issue, is most Americans are forced to take generic drugs. And there's a donut hole here of liability. The manufacturer, so once a drug becomes a generic, the generic drug company, if there's someone dies on the generic drug, they'll go, wait a minute, we didn't make the formula, we're not responsible. And then the parent company said, well, wait, we sold this down, to you a long time ago. So neither the patent, the one that has the original patent, and the generic company hold any accountability. So we ended up suing the parent company, GSK, even though Stewart was on the generic, and we were the first lawsuit in the United States that was allowed to go forward to sue the drug company, because we're very blessed with Judge Zagel in the state of Illinois, and he's an incredible judge. And Judge Zagel said, this isn't about generic issues, this is product liability. In the state of Illinois, you cannot lie about your product, and it went forward. And let me tell you, everything you can imagine behind the backstabbing, things to do, calling friends unannounced, where the normal number of depositions are 10. I think they total 30 or 40, and the trial went on for 6 weeks. These poor jurors, and I hope if any of them are listening, I'm eternally grateful to you. And what was so profound about this lawsuit is that I believe, because you can't really ask a juror what happened. Right. I think when they saw the original drug trials and saw the Dear Doctor's letters, I think that a jury of our peers with no connection to anything else, Americans are smart, they saw it and they awarded me a victory. And so so it was the first lawsuit in the United States for this to happen. So needless to say, this was a huge, huge issue. But the idea of drug trials, and I think that's why I'm so sensitive to the word drug trials with the current COVID situation, is because of what happened in the case of Paxil. I mean, to knowingly do that. I remember at one point, one of my attorneys said to the GSK doctor, wait a minute, 40 people became akathisia and 20 people killed themselves, and you didn't think this was worth reporting? So it turned out that, of course, GSK appealed, and we went to the Seventh Circuit, and it was overturned in the Seventh Circuit, not because they believed Stewart killed themselves. There was a discrepancy in accountability. The lower court felt GSK was responsible. The higher court felt FDA was responsible. We even took it to the Supreme Court because that's how important we felt it was. And so it was a long legal journey. And even though I didn't win money, I won. Oh, yeah. To me, I won because to me, the satisfaction of knowing the jurors heard the word akathisia and actually saw the drug trials. And they said, this is wrong. You can't do that. And so that's been a very profound thing that I'm really proud of. Apparently, they talk about this case in law schools.
Well, it was a case of first impression, as you're talking about it. For those lawyers out there, we like our first impression. But it's, yeah, I mean, you are talking about groundbreaking law. The law doesn't always get it right. There are loopholes in the law, and you've been through all of that. But the information that you gathered, because that's the thing people maybe aren't understanding, is, when you are involved in a lawsuit, the discovery phase allowed your attorneys to go to these companies and get information from them that they don't give us in the public, that they don't put out there. That's how you know that 20 people committed suicide and 40 people were akathisia during that time of the trial, and that it wasn't reported. That because you got information through that lawsuit, because you were so insistent on doing the right thing. I know what lawsuits cost. I know the time and energy and effort that goes into a product liability case like that. I know the years that must have unfolded over at a time in your life when, not that the loss ever goes away, but it was still relatively fresh, and you were still dealing with the loss of your husband and all of this information coming in. So your bravery in that front as well is something to be commended and applauded, and that you share that information. I think it's important for people to know, as they're going into the COVID era and we're waiting for drugs to come down, our drug trial procedures and protocols are somewhat broken.
Yes.
The thing that people may not have gotten out of all this is, who does the drug trials to see if the drugs if they work and if they have side effects?
It's such a great question, because up until my own personal experience, I don't know what was wrong with me. I thought the FDA was the group that tested the drugs. And what I later found out, and it's pretty incestuous, is that they just get the information from the drug companies. And based on that, they will approve a drug. And unfortunately, people who work for the FDA go work for Big Pharma, and those people from Big Pharma go and work for the FDA. I mean, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who was the former chair of the FDA, I think had 23 conflicts of interest with drug companies. So, I'm nothing against him, I don't know.
But a conflict of interest means he had an existing relationship that may have impaired his neutrality with respect to reviewing their drugs, right? I mean, that's just what a conflict of interest is.
Yeah. So this has been an incredible journey, and it was painful. And, some of the things that they tried to do to my family, my friends. But I want to say this, getting back to the anti-drug message, I think because of the fact that I am huge supporters of doctors. I'm not saying that they don't make mistakes, but if they're given false information like the rest of the public, I think that they're hurt just as much as consumers. I mean, that's
Yep.
my philosophy.
Well, that's that Dear Doctor letter, right? It's the same as the FDA. The FDA gets their information from the drug companies. So do the doctors.
Correct.
That's where the information comes from. And if the regulations aren't tight enough or strong enough that all factual and important information needs to be shared, maybe I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe that's where the problem lies, is that, that there could be significant outcomes such as people killing themselves during the trials or committing suicide during the trials and reporting symptoms of akathisia, yet that was not considered important to report. There's
Absolutely.
something missing there.
I always say to people, if I was the Bill Gates of psychotherapy, every drug would be tested independently, not by anyone with any connection to a pharmacy, not pharmacy, big pharma, and just a complete independent review. Be really curious to see what the results actually were.
Yeah. Hey, Bill Gates, you've got to, you're out there throwing money at a lot of different things. Here's something great to get started. Maybe Bill Gates listens to the podcast, but excuse me. One of the other things, though, that I wanted to bring up is the word that we keep using here is suicide. And that seems like a simple word. Everyone thinks they understand what suicide is or what suicide means. We are talking about this topic during October, which is Suicide Prevention Month.
September.
Oh, September. I'm sorry. It is September, is Suicide Prevention Month. And suicide is a complicated topic that has many nuances and layers to it. And I think that's something else that is clear from this discussion that we're having. But I'd love to have you expound on that a little bit more.
Thank you. Being a clinician, I was trained that suicide is usually a mental health issue. When I learned about a drug, if you were going to kill yourself on a medication in grad school, they called it the rollback effect, which means you took a drug, you were already having suicidal thoughts, the drug made you manic, and then you acted out your urge. And then, you learn about akathisia, and it's a whole different thing. So what I think has happened, and this is something that I'm really proud of, is that, if you had said to me, Susan, I have cancer, you told me this, and the first thing I'd say to you is, well, obviously, empathize and all that, but I'd say, well, what kind? And so we sort of have this understanding that there's many types of cancers. I think we need to know that there are many reasons people end their life. And actually, they're not using the word committed anymore, though everybody uses it. It's because they're trying to decriminalize it. You didn't commit a crime. And so and again, everyone still uses it, but we now say end your life by suicide or, just because you want to take away some of the stigma. And so I think that what's happened to MIST is, because we add to the equation adverse drug side effects, I think, and I'm seeing now a broader conversation, like MIST is invited to participate in suicide prevention conferences that I don't think would have normally been part of the conferences before MIST was founded. And even with CTEs, the athletes that are ending their lives because of brain concussions. So what I'm grateful for is that we now have an expanded conversation. And this is so important to us that we have actually designated September 20th is International Akathesia Awareness Day. And because we want people to understand that this is something that's also part of the conversation. And so I think that's been a really, I hate to use the word gratifying, but because we're talking about suicide, but I'm happy that we're reaching more people and it's more inclusive.
Well, that's such a very significant indication of the success of your mission, of the fact that you are getting the word out there and that people are hearing that this is not a simple topic, that people ending their life by suicide is not as simple as, oh, they had a mental health issue and therefore they ended their life. There are a myriad of reasons. And for those people out there who have loved ones who ended their life by suicide, what you're saying to them may actually be giving them the answer that they've been looking for years, because they didn't understand. Like you said, Stuart was not in that place where this was something that was in contemplation. He was on the medication for 6 days before he ended his life.
I of course was not coherent at the time of his death, but when people told people that he was hit by a train, I'd say 99% of the people go, "Wait, was he pushed? Was this,
Yeah.
Did he trip? Was he pushed?" I mean, that was people's first reactions.
Yeah. And I think that's, I can only imagine the people out there who hear your message, who do have someone they lost, who ended their life by suicide, who are having light bulbs going off as they hear this, because the pieces are falling into place, or an understanding, or even just the possibility that maybe there's, we all want to have a reason, or we all want to understand what happened. And so even in that way, you're helping people. You're getting the message out to those to prevent this in the future, but there's also a message for the families or the people who have lost someone.
And another important part of what we do is shared at missed, where people write in their stories, and people become advocates. Like, this wasn't something that I was planning on doing. Though being a social worker, obviously I care about social injustice, but I think that the message here is that we become experts, through our experiences. And I think that that's been also an incredible part of this whole journey, is all the people that I've met throughout the years of Mist, activists from all over the world who have been affected by this. And, thank you, Wendy, for what you're doing.
Well, and that's actually to round out this episode, one thing I'd like to circle back to, because many of my listeners or viewers are people going through the significant life change of divorce. And, what we've been talking about here, maybe some people are saying, well, what does this have to do with me going through my divorce? But I think that there's incredible power in your journey for them as well, because what you've done is take probably one of the most traumatic things that could ever happen to someone, and you've pivoted with that and turned it into this incredible journey and gift to the world that you've done. And you've made your loss have significance in ways that, I'm sure you will never even know the far-reaching impact of your gift to the world. And I think there's a great deal of power. And maybe you could just share where you found the strength and the ability to go forward and take such a personal loss and share it with everyone in such a powerful way.
Thank you. I mean, well, first of all, to direct to your viewers that this is a channel regarding divorce, is just like Dr. Cohn said, during any big life event, whether it's COVID, divorce, death of a loved one, people turn to medications. So I don't think you have to have experienced a suicide per se. I mean, you were, Susan, you were taking it for, situational affective, seasonal affective disorder.
Bad. Yeah.
This was, and I think why this, I would hope, resonates with all your viewers is we take meds, we need to be aware. And secondly, as a therapist, I talk a lot about loss. I mean, there's the loss of death, actual loss, but there's a loss of what your life thought would be. I mean, I've not been divorced, but I can only say as a widow, this isn't what I thought my life was going to be. And, when most people get divorced, they don't get married. I don't think they think that they're going to end up in divorce. And I think that this is, and I think for me, this is what I think really guides me. I think a lot has to do with my father. My father had a wonderful attitude about life. And people quote my dad all the time, like he had all these health issues towards the end of his life. And, and people would say to him, you have such a great attitude about life. And he goes, well, why not? And I think that why not moment, which is why not should I try not to go forward? And I think that also having children, and Stuart and I worked so much as a team and to be really great parents, and we have wonderful kids, that, I wanted to be a role model and say, you know what, we can get through this. And it's not easy. Trust me, this has not been easy. But I think that power of I'm a positive person. I'm basically a happy person. And I just didn't want to go through my life. I mean, I tell this to my clients as well. It's sometimes you reach a crossroads in your life. Where are you going? It's the victim. Why did this happen to me? I'm terrible. Or it's the why not moment. Why not feel better? Why not? And so I think that knowing the love I had of Stuart and knowing who he was, I wanted to honor him, because you just can't get away with this. You cannot lie about your product and then think it's just okay.
Right.
And I want to end with one thing, and it's sort of Stuart kind of talked to me. I think about this quite a bit, and I've actually spoken on this. He came home from law school the first year, and I've never been to law school. I don't know if it was in torts or contract or whatever. And he said he was really disturbed by the cost of doing business, that things happen and people just say, okay, the benefits outweigh the risks. It's just the cost of doing business. And I thought a lot about that. And, maybe in this world, the cost of doing business is that people are going to die. But what about the cost to the loved ones left behind? And I think that cost is also something I think about a lot. And that drives me to do what I do.
And you do it so beautifully and with such grace. And, you're a true inspiration to me. And I'm so happy that we were able to do this episode, an extended episode. And I thank you, because I truly believe that your message has personally helped me and is going to help so many people who are listening to this. And again, I encourage all of you to spread this message, to go to the Mist website, to gather more information, share the posts. Please get this message out. This is such an important message. This is much more common than you think it is, and people just don't know. And, I want to end with what you just said. I think this is just the most powerful thing. When you're at that moment in your life where you're at the crossroads, like Wendy just said, you can be the victim. Why did my divorce happen to me? Why did my husband die? Why did this happen? Or you can say, why not? Why not feel better? It's the why not moment. And Wendy, you are a shining example of why. So thank you so much for coming on the episode.
It's been my honor, and I can't thank you enough. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.